안녕하세요. Hello, Nax 선생님들, 여러분. Today's lecture is on peaceful Korean history, unique significance of few Korean surnames. And this is for NACS, the National Association of Korean Schools. From my point of view, the 20th century was an aberration. Looking beyond the 20th century, we're going to look for the true Korea. This is a perspective of the frog outside the well. Number 10 on my top 10 list of unique features of peaceful Korean history is few surnames. And this is number 10 on a list of 10. And this is something that, these are 10 of the reasons why I think Korea has a peaceful history. And I have a video, there's a YouTube about each one of these that you can follow up on and watch if you want to. I'm going to talk about number 10, and then come back and talk about number 7, and maybe a little bit about number 1 and number 2. But we're starting with significant surnames because I think this is something really interesting, really different from other countries. Korea has very, very few surnames, and they have a high concentration of population within these few surnames. There are only about 250 surnames in Korea traditionally. And today, with some extra names that have come in, there are only about 400. So that's very, very few compared to like Japan that has 300,000 names, different names. Here's a Wikipedia page that says there were over 300,000 names. Then later it says there are 291,129 different surnames. But at any rate, it's a completely different way of looking at surnames in Korea than it is in Japan, and really for the rest of the world. Kims, there are 21% of the population are Kims. Compare this to Japan, where the most common surname is Sato, and it's only 1.5% of the population. In China, it's a little bit different. You have the Wang Shi, which is about 7%. But you see, Korea really is quite unique. And you compare it to other countries. There's the Japan at Sato at 1.5%. Sometimes people say Kim in Korea is like Smith in America. It's nothing like Smith in America. Smith in America is not even 1%. In India, you hear the name Singh a lot. That's only 2.7%. In Spain, there are a lot of Garcias, 3.5%. In Germany, Müller is most common, but only 0.8%. And in China, in addition to Wang, you have Li and Chang, each with about 7%. So those three together make up what the Kims are in Korea. The one exception you find in the world is Vietnam. Vietnam, 38% of the people are named Nguyen. But this is a different thing. I say it's phony because only about a third of the Nguyen are real Nguyen for a long time from a historical background. But when the Nguyen Dynasty took over, they gave the name Nguyen to all of their allies. So about a third of the Nguyen are new Nguyen with the new Nguyen Dynasty. And the remaining third were enemies of the Nguyen Dynasty who changed their name to accommodate Nguyen so Nguyen wouldn't go out and retaliate against them. So the Nguyen names are fairly new. It's not quite the same thing as you have in Korea with the Kims. In Korea, you have the Kims at 21%, Lee at 15%, and Pak at almost 9%. Add in Che and Chung, and you've got 55% of the population with only 5 surnames. This is really unique in the world. The question is why? Why is this the case? And if you think about it, for me, I didn't think about it. It just seemed like a natural thing. Most Koreans think it's a natural thing. But if you ask the question, why is this the case? You really got to be the umur pake keguri. You got to be the frog outside the well to look at this, because the question is why? And I think we can find some answers. It took me about 52 years to figure it out. I just accepted it as normal, like most Koreans do. But then I decided, no, this isn't normal. There's something about the Korean history that makes the few surnames. So why? There are 2 basic theories about this. The first theory is my favorite theory, that peaceful Korea. Korea has this long, peaceful tradition, and that's why we have so many surnames. The long dynasties and smooth transitions between dynasties, these are number 1 and number 2 on my top 10 list. the line of the dynasties in Korea were never destroyed. And this is unlike other countries where when one dynasty ends, they destroy the dynasty. They kill a lot of the people from that dynasty. The Kim, Yi, and Pak names are all royal names. They come from royalty from the Kaya dynasty, the Shilla dynasty, and the Chosun dynasty. So they're royal names. That's one reason why we have so many Kim, Yi, and Pak. Basically, we have one aristocratic class that has continued in Korea for over 1,500 years. This is a quotation from Martina Deuchler, who looks at the aristocratic classes continuing on for over a millennium and a half. So there are two theories. My favorite theory is that there's peaceful Korea, but the other theory is because of slaves. And people say that because there were so many slaves, and slaves didn't have surnames, they took on surnames, and they didn't take on original surnames. You know, they weren't called Rock or Goat or some other kind of slave-like name. They took on names of common people around the country. What was the percentage of slaves that came into any particular surname? There are a lot of people that say 90% of the Kims were from the slave tradition. I don't think so. I think it's more like 20 to 40%. And I've got a way of looking at this, and that is, if we look at the Chosun dynasty surnames before this modern period, before the 20th century, if we look at the Chosun period, the aristocratic names, the names of people who passed exams, we get a chart that looks like this. And on this chart, on the far right-hand side, we've got the order, the pecking order of who they are. Let's zero in on the top 5 here for just a second. The top 5, number 1 exam passers in the Chosun dynasty were named Yi, and a lot of these were the royal family. The Cheonju Yi is the predominantly largest number of people that passed the exams. They had 3,000 people pass the exams. Number 2 were the Kims. They had 2,000 people pass. The percentages in the examination system were Yi were 20% and Kim were 14%. In the modern era, those two switched, but they're still number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is in the same place, and that's Pak, with 800 exam passers. And then Che is really interesting because Che was number 9 in the exams, but it turns out to be number 4 in population today. And Chung was number 4 in the exams, and it's number 5. So we see the top 5 is pretty much the same. And if we look at the next 14, from number 6 to 19, we see that the numbers are pretty well parallel all the way down. A little bit of shifting here and there, but the point is that these surnames are in the same ratio, basically, as they are in Korea today. And so what does this say about slaves? It says that the slave names accrued to the surnames in roughly the ratio that was already out there. In other words, a man named Chung, his slaves would probably take on the name of Chung. They weren't all a bunch of Kims. That's not why we have so many Kims today. In Korea, it's really interesting, these surnames. The top 19 represent about 75% of the population. The top 31, these are other common surnames you run into. And then the top 42, these are, by the time you get to the top 42, you're pretty much into the 90 percentile of all Korean names. Beyond that, they're really rare names. So on the Kims, if 21% of the population is Kim, even if half of those were slaves, that's still a large percent that are not slaves that came down through Kaya and Shilla royalty. So if it was 50% slaves, then still 10% are of royal heritage. I don't think it was 50%. I think it was more like 70-30, 70 royal and 30% slaves, which means in the overall percentage of the Korean population is about 15% descended from royalty and only about 6% descended from slaves. This is just my intuition. I haven't really been able to do this statistically yet. Well, the point is that the two theories of why there are so many Kim, Yi, and Pak, the peaceful Korea theory is not contradicted by the slavery theory, because the slavery theory can exist with the peaceful Korea theory. It's just that we say that the slaves accrued to the surnames in the same ratio as the surnames were to begin with. So that's my look at the significance of few surnames in Korea. And as I said, it took me a long time to figure this out. 52 years of doing Korean studies before I finally thought, hey, what is the reason for this? And that's what I've come up with.
Next time on The Frog Outside the Well.
The question then is, why does Korea have these peaceful transitions and these long dynasties? And I think the answer is on my number 7 on the top 10 list, and that is Sunbi culture, not samurai culture.